Shalom, brothers and sisters who are scattered in all corners of the earth. Sanbonan, my name is Mpumelelo. Welcome to this channel. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the subscribers of this channel. Thank you for your support and thank you for all the contributions that you make. Please do not forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family. If you are new to this channel, please consider to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like this video, and share it with your friends and family. So what are we looking at today? Today we are looking at part 4 of the topic that we've been discussing in the past weeks, which is revealing the biblical land of Canaan. We want to put the biblical history into perspective and dispel the assumptions that we make when we read the Bible. And sometimes these assumptions are brought about by what is being taught, either in the church or if you have been, if you have been in a seminary. That's the teaching you will get from your Bible teachers. Be they, have qualifications in biblical studies or whatever. But we always make these assumptions. So we need to dispel these assumptions. Now, before we do that, let's recap on the message we had last week. Last week I pointed out that Egypt, its borders extended in fact, it did not have the borders northward. You did not have the Suez Canal that you have today, which was built around 1859. The Suez Canal allows for the easy movement. It's an artificial channel that has been created, which allows military, marine, and commercial ships to move from Europe to Asia. Before the Suez Canal, the ships had to move all the way to South Africa from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to Indian Ocean. So this cut the trip by over 6,000 kilometers, if I'm not mistaken. But what happened was that we now have a region called the Middle East, which includes the place that is known as Israel today. Whereas this Middle East did not exist. Egypt had control over the land or the peninsula, which is also another misnomer. Today is called the Sinai Peninsula. It was called Arabia Patria, but I'm sure that it had a different name in the 8th BCE to 5th CE. It was called Arabia Patria. You can imagine that during the migration of our fathers and mothers from Egypt to the Promised Land, Sinai Peninsula had a different name. And it was one land from Egypt to the Sinai Peninsula, and there was no border between the Sinai Peninsula and what is known today as Israel. So that whole place was known as Egypt or Mizraim. It had different names at different times. The border that is created today to separate the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt was only created around 1906. And further borders that demarcate the land that is known today as modern Israel were created after 1948. So there was no such place as Israel. It was created. Now those who want to believe, I was one of them, by the way, I should not sound as if I'm better than others. I was one of them who believed that modern Israel is the Promised Land. But make this make sense. If our forefathers escaped from Egypt. And they went to Mount Sinai, because we were told that Mount Sinai is in the Sinai Peninsula. Does it make sense that they escaped into the land of Egypt, the land that was controlled by Egypt? Surely there's something wrong there. You can't escape from your enemy and walk right into their territory. You want to be as far away from your enemy as possible. And this is what happened. That's why they did not cross the river, the Red Sea, but they crossed the river Nile, and they came deeper into the south. Their first station was Sudan and Chad, which interestingly, Josephus Flavors call it Babylon. He says it's the place where Babylon was built. But this is the place, there's nothing new that Josephus Flavors is saying. This is the place where Nimrod lived. Nimrod was the son of Cush. And Cush, we are told in Genesis 2 that the river Nile runs in the land of Cush. Now, I explained that the river Nile and the river Gihon is the same. It's the same thing. Now, there are those brothers and sisters who insist that there's Gihon in Israel. There is no Gihon in Israel. If there is Gihon in Israel, it's created. Josephus tells us that the word Nile is Greek and the word Gihon is Hebrew. Now, we're going to talk about this Hebrew in a minute. So these words are synonymous. And the Nile is not in Israel. The Nile is in the continent of Africa. And we are told that the borders of the promised land runs across or on the border of the river of Egypt. This river of Egypt is the Nile River. It puts the promised land right at the center of the continent of Africa. Now we can believe what we want to believe. This is what the Bible is telling us. The other, I've mentioned the Sinai Peninsula, but this is an interesting thing about the Sinai Peninsula. It was not called Sinai Peninsula. It was called Arabia Petraea, but there must have been another name. And who called it the Sinai Peninsula? The peninsula acquired the name Sinai in modern times, in the 1900s, due to the assumption, now this is important, due to the assumption that a mountain near St. Catherine's Monastery is the biblical Mount Sinai. So the name Sinai was attached to the peninsula of Egypt after the Catholics assumed that the mountain near the church that they built is Mount Sinai. It doesn't make sense. You know, they are forcing a puzzle to fit where it doesn't fit. That's me. I do that quite easily. When it frustrates me, I start forcing a piece of a puzzle where it doesn't fit. But this is what Catholics, it's a rumor. It is a rumor started by Catholics when they built a church and they assumed that the mountain next to that church, and these idol worshippers go there and worship under that tree because they believe that the Spirit of the Most High exists there. They will even tell you that there's an aura, there's something there when you are in that place. I'm sure when you are in some of these temples that are built by people, you will feel something when you go into them. I'm certain that there's a spirit that you will feel, but it is definitely not the Spirit of the Most High. Let us look at the assumptions that people make. Until recently, I also made this assumption. When you read Genesis 11, now when you read Genesis 11, this is just after the floods. So after the floods, now it is important to note that after the floods, later on we're going to have to talk about where this Mount Ararat, where the ark that was built by Noah landed. We are told that it is in the mountains of Armenia. There's even a program on YouTube where we are told that they found the remnants of that ark. Now, I used to believe that, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because we will talk about this later. The animals that came out of that ark, they would have multiplied in Armenia and they would have them today. But those animals are found here in the continent, all of them. There's no continent that has the richness of everything combined. Be it agricultural products, be it animals, be it mineral resources, everything is here. It is the land of milk and honey. No doubt about it. When I used to believe that modern Israel is the land of milk and honey, and my brothers and sisters were fighting with me, I think that in Arabic they will say, will they call it a jihad, a righteous battle. So it was good because they were trying to steer me into the right direction. I suppose jihad is a bit, it includes violence. But they were trying to steer me in the right direction. And I was saying, no, if modern Israel is the promised land and it is barren today, the Most High will provide. And I think that spiritually it's a logical explanation. We all say the Most High will provide. But this is not the biblical land. It is not the biblical land because it just doesn't make sense. It defies all logic. The river Gihon, the river Nile, Babylon. Now we're going to talk a little bit about, I deviated. I was going to say, let us dispel some of the assumptions that we make when we read the Bible. I think that's where I was at. When you read Genesis 11, and I said this is just after the floods, there were 8 people on earth. 8 people on earth. It was Noah and his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. So they began to populate the earth. Genesis 11 takes just after the floods. It says, now the whole earth had one language and one speech. Now, when you read something like this, that says the whole earth had one language and one speech, what comes to mind immediately? What comes to mind immediately is that the entire world spoke one language. But this is not what they are saying here. Because we will see when I get to chapter 4 what these people are saying. Now the whole earth had one language and one speech. Verse 2, and it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar. So we're going to talk more about the land of Shinar. And they dwelt there. Then they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They had bricks for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. And they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole world. So they were building a tower, lest they be scattered on the face of the whole earth. So when you read verse 1, now the whole earth had one language and one speech. They are not talking about the continent of Africa, Australia, North America, South America, Russia. They are not talking about that. They're talking about one continent. They're talking about one place. These were few people. And they built a tower there. A tower in the land of Shinar, a tower which was later called Babel, which is Babylon. It's in Sudan. And they are ancient ruins. No one is interested in investigating those. They already know. But they want us to be interested in the ruins of Egypt, and they want the focus to be on Israel. Now, we should know this. Nations are jealous of the children of Yasharel. They will do anything to make us sin. The warning that was given to Moses, or through Moses, was that if you go into this, you'll find in Deuteronomy, if you go into the land which I will give you, this was the Most High speaking, do not do the things that are done by those nations. We are a special nation. We cannot have the same belief systems. You want to believe it or not, the same belief systems that other nations have. If you find yourself believing in what other nations believe in, you must know you're in the wrong. Ours is not even a religion. It is a system of governing a righteous people. It is a way of governing people who are chosen by the Most High to be a light to the world. The same system that was given at Mount Sinai is the same system that governed us today. It has not changed. Now, when you read the New Testament, it will tell you it has changed. It will tell you there's a Messiah who has died for our sins. We were never told that at Mount Sinai. There's no such thing. Okay, I'm getting excited. Let's dispel the second assumption. The second assumption is found in Genesis 14. Genesis 14 verse 13. Genesis 14, if you read it from verse 1, it talks about the kings. Again, it will say the kings of the earth. But it talks about the kings which were formed within the continent. This is where Nimrod lived. This is where other kings lived. The king of Sodom and Gomorrah. And they were attacking each other. And in the midst of that, Lot was taken into captivity. And a servant escaped. Someone escaped and came to tell Abraham, our father, that Lot was taken. But the focus of this message is not about what happened. If you want to read the whole story, please go ahead. It's in Genesis 14. But this is what I want to bring across. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew. Abram the Hebrew. I will end here. I will not read the whole thing. Abram the Hebrew. It is for the first time in the Bible that we are told that Abram or Abraham later on, as he was known, is a Hebrew. Now, how is Abraham a Hebrew? Okay, what does Hebrew mean? The word Hebrew means the one who come from beyond. So it is believed that Abraham crossed the river Euphrates before he went to the river, before he came to the promised land or the land of Canaan. The river Euphrates is not in Iraq. It's not even, the word Euphrates and the word Tigris are translations. Euphrates is Perat, which has been erased in the maps today. Tigris is Hiddekel. Again, Hiddekel is also erased in the maps today. For some reasons, they didn't remove the Nile and the Gihon, which is helping us to find the location of the promised land. So we are told that Abraham came across or beyond the river Euphrates. And so the word Hebrew means the one who comes beyond the rivers, or who crossed the rivers. Ibri in Hebrew. Interestingly, the word Ibri sounds similar to the greeting in Swahili, in Swahili, habari. Ibri, habari. It sounds similar. I'm confident that they stole the name from the languages that we speak. So they say he spoke, before they say he spoke Hebrew, they say is Abram the Hebrew. And later on, this word Hebrew is used to refer to the descendants of Abraham, the Hebrews. That's what our forefathers were called in Egypt. That's what they were called all over the place, the Hebrews. Even Josephus Flavius referred to them as the Hebrews. Now, if the word Hebrew comes from, or if the meaning of the word Hebrew means beyond or across the rivers, how did it become a language? How did people end up speaking a language known as Hebrew today? How did it happen? We don't have, you and I don't know, we are not in possession of the early manuscripts, the Hebrew manuscripts that were handwritten, that were written by our forefathers, or I should say the biblical manuscripts of what is known as the Tanakh. I don't believe that our fathers called it Tanakh. I think it was the Ashkenazis who interpreted it as such, or who gave it a name, because the word Tanakh is the abbreviations of the Torah, the Navim, and the Ketuvim, which is the instructions or the law, the prophets, and the writings. But what language were they written in? Were they written in Hebrew? Because even the Ashkenazi came to speak Hebrew as a spoken language around the 18th to the 19th century. They didn't speak it, so they learned it. Okay, let us park this issue for a second. I want to talk about the language that Abraham spoke. We are told that Abraham came from Ur or Ur. I have difficulties pronouncing this word. If I read it in the Hebrew language, it will be Ur. And people pronounce it in English and they get lost. They said, what is that name that you said Abraham came from? So it is Ur of the Chaldeans or Chaldeans. Ur of the Chaldeans, which is the area in Babel where Nimrod lived. Now, when you read the book of Jasher or Jasher, chapters 7 and 8, all the way to 27, you will learn that when Abraham was born, Abraham lived in the same area in Shinar where Nimrod lived. On 2 occasions, Nimrod wanted to kill Abraham. Firstly, because his wise men, let's call them wise men, went to Terah, his father, Abraham's father, when Abraham was born. They went there, they had a big party. And when they came out of the party, they saw a star, and they interpreted it as someone who will come from the line of Terah, who will kill Nimrod. They told the story to Nimrod, and Nimrod wanted to kill Abraham. Abraham's father, Terah, who was a prince in the kingdom of Nimrod. He was a high official in the kingdom of Nimrod. He had to hide his son. He hid him in the caves and took the son of his servant, who was also born around the time Abraham was born. He took the son of his servant and he presented that boy to Nimrod, and Nimrod had that boy killed. But later on, it was found that this son that was killed, it was Terah actually who confessed. He confessed because he became angry at Abraham. Abraham destroyed all the gods of his father. And again, Abraham, for the better part of his life, before he was 50, he was raised by Shem and Noah before Noah died. So the book of Jasher gives you a perspective of how Abraham left Ur of the Chaldeans. So at some point, Abraham went and lived with Shem, Eber or Eber, and Noah. He lived there over 37 years because he was afraid of Nimrod. So he grew up there. That's why he knew the ways of the Most High. And when he came back, with his understanding, he went to a chamber where he found his father having built wooden gods. He destroyed all of them. And his father went to Nimrod and told him that boy that I killed, I told you a wrong story, I lied. This is my boy, this is my son who did this. And Nimrod said, who advised you to take your son and hide him and give him a wrong son? And Abraham's father said it was his firstborn son, Haran. So Abraham's father lied to Nimrod and said, he lied about twice or many times. He lied when Abraham was born, he hid him. And when Abraham destroyed his gods, he went to Nimrod and told him that his son destroyed his gods and his son did not die. And so Nimrod said, whoever told you to lie to me so that Abraham survives, bring them both here so that they get their punishment. And so Terah, who was Abraham's father, lied and told and twisted the story, which he was involved in. So he threw his son under the bus, his firstborn. So Nimrod and Abraham were put into the furnace by the servants of Nimrod. Abraham did not die in that furnace, but Haran died because he was double-minded. He was double-minded. Now I'm telling a long story here, and I'm taking about, I think I get carried away. Haran was double-minded. He said to himself, if Abraham prevails, then I'll be with Abraham. But if the king prevails, then I will be with the king. So Abraham was consistent in his belief. He believed in the Most High, and he didn't die, he didn't burn in that furnace. And Nimrod took him out. But when Nimrod took him out, the servant of Abraham, who was among the servants of Nimrod, because when he took him out of that furnace, they were scared of Abraham. And they started to believe, I think, as a matter of convenience. They gave Abraham some presents, some gold, some silver. This is where Abraham got his gold. They gave him some gold before Abimelech in Egypt gave him, or before the king of Egypt also gave him some gold. The point that I want to make is that Abraham was a contemporary of all these people: Nimrod, Cush, Shem, Ham, and Noah. These people lived long. Noah lived, I think he died when he was 930. So he saw most of the sons, he witnessed a lot of things that happened after they came out of the ark. Now this is the point. Abraham spoke the language that was spoken in Ur. When Genesis 11 tells us that the whole earth spoke one language, Abraham was with those people who spoke that language. When Nimrod built cities, so what happened is after the Tower of Babel, and this is another point, after the Tower of Babel wasn't dismantled, but their languages were confused. That one language which they spoke was confused, and they ended up speaking various dialects of languages. And it frustrated their efforts to continue with their project to build the Tower of Babel. So they abandoned the project. It explains why Abraham left Ur of the Chaldeans and he went to Haran. And he stayed there with his father for 3 years. And his father remained there. He did not proceed to go to Canaan. But Abraham proceeded and he went to Canaan. And he found the Canaanites living there. Now think about this. He left Ur of the Chaldeans. He went to Canaan. He could converse with people easily. From Haran, he went to Canaan, and he could speak to people. So they spoke dialects of the same language. It's like Zulu. We understand it here in the continent because they are dialects of the same language. So we have, in South Africa, you have Zulu, you have Swazi, you have Xhosa, you have Ndebele. we can speak, all of us, we can understand each other, with the exception of a few words. Similarly, when we are in Kenya, they speak over 68 languages. But there are certain dialects that they can understand. The common language that is spoken amongst them is Swahili. But when they speak certain languages, even us here in South Africa, when Swahili is spoken, we can understand certain words. So people began to speak dialects of certain words. Now tell me, all right, before I get to that, if you go to Nigeria, you'll find that Nigerians speak over 500. I'm not saying one person speaks, but I'm saying that nation, the languages that are spoken there are over 500. If you go to Congo, the languages that are spoken there are over 300. The languages seems to get less and less as you get to the southern part of the continent. In South Africa, we speak 9 languages, excluding English and Afrikaans. But 9 languages of the Bantu languages. You go to Botswana, you find there's fewer there. You go to Lesotho, you find this. You go to Zimbabwe, you find there's less than 10. Zambia and so on, Malawi, they become fewer. But as you go up towards Shinar, towards Babylon, you find there are a lot of languages there. But languages also go with culture. Culture also go with all sorts of beliefs. So when this judgment was passed, it did not affect Iraq. If Shinar is in Iraq, how many languages do they speak in Iraq? The whole sub-Sahara, where we believe that the 10 tribes of Israel are, all of it speaks over 2,000 languages. Over 2,000 languages. The rest of Africa combined, we speak over 3,500 languages. So who was affected by this confusion of languages? And where did all these other belief systems begin to sprout? If you go to West Africa, you find all sorts of beliefs, voodoo, and all sorts of things. There's ancestral beliefs as well in the southern part. All sorts of things are found here in the continent. Now tell me, can we still say that all these things happened? Or can we still say Shinar is in Iraq convincingly? How were they affected by the confusion of languages? When we talk about the land of milk and honey, can we convincingly say that all animals that Noah brought to the ark can be found today anywhere in the Middle East? Whether it is Israel or Jordan or Syria or further up north, Iraq, Iran, there are no animals that are found, the animals that we have here. So it doesn't make sense. The Bible does not say that Mesopotamia is in Iraq. It is the commentary, the biblical interpretation of people. It is people who are telling us all these things. With all that being said, Abraham finally lived in Canaan. And he lived with the Canaanites. And at some point he went to Egypt. Which language did he speak? Because whatever language he spoke, it's the language that was understood by the people he found. And our experience is that as you move, your language becomes diluted. It's either you adapt to the languages that are spoken by the people you find. You don't really maintain your language. The Ashkenazi are telling us that this Hebrew that they are speaking is the holy language. Now, we're going to find some interesting things about this Hebrew. I said that about 2,000 languages are spoken only in the southern African region. But there's something interesting here. There's a common language that is spoken by at least 14 countries, and it is understood by other countries. Swahili. Is it not possible that this Swahili is the original biblical language? How come? It is the language that remains today, that is spoken by people in majority. Swahili. There are certain words, mainly or largely from people who live in Kenya and Tanzania, who say, that word sounds like Swahili or a dialect in our country when I speak in a Hebrew. They say that word, but it has a different meaning. Now, my guess is that the Ashkenazi got hold of the scripts, the biblical scripts. They didn't know what these things were. They may be too proud to go and ask. They probably knew who were the people who spoke this language, but they decided on their own to translate the Bible. And where they could not understand the meaning, they gave it a meaning. Because these languages are similar to the languages that we speak. The language of the Bible is similar to the languages that we speak. In particular, Swahili, or the dialects of Swahili. This is all that I have for you today. All praises to the Most High. Ngiyabonga. Asante sana. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.